Yeah, and that actually brings us to our final segment, and this is actually a subscriber submitted question.
Oh, yes.
Here we go from Mr. William Luna. And Mr. Luna is asking, I'm watching and want to get your take on Josh DAmaro.
Oh, boy.
What if, and I know this is parks related, but I think it ties to the overall company overall and the corporate politics of this whole thing.
Yeah.
So he says, and I'm playing devil's advocate here. He's quiet and sitting back because he's been told to do so by Iger? ? They are letting Chapek spiral down, and it was always to be DAmaro. For a guy at beginning to be vocal on cast members and now so quiet is telling. He's not making these decisions. He's watching the train wreck. If they vote Chapek out, does he have CEO leadership? He has theme park leadership, but can he handle the studio where Chapek is bombing big time with talent? I think DAmaro can lead and rally everyone behind him, but can you stop a freight train already going 70 miles an hour with these current decisions? This Pandora box is open. Can it be closed? George, what are your thoughts on that? A little 4D chess going on here.
Well, I know that we were talking a little bit about this actually before the question actually came up that I had mentioned about DAmaro, where he's just kind of like sitting in the wings, just kind of like not saying anything. It's like you see him in the park. He loves taking photos with the guests and everything, but is he really contributing anything good or bad? Because you don't really hear anything of him. As far as this kind of like silent manipulation kind of thing, like where it's like, okay, we're going to get, Chapek. I don't think it's to that degree. I just think that it's just one of those things where even if they did decide down the road, Chapek wasn't the perfect fit for CEO, I think that it would just be very discreet to say, hey, Chapek stepping down, we're going to move forward of, DAmaro taking his place or what have you, or somebody else. But I don't really think, as for how these guys are part of this company, they're not just messing with each other's careers. They're messing with a global national company that is known the world over, that's been around for almost 100 years, to say the least. So, I mean, I don't really think that it's to that height. However, I do believe that they're basically covering their own ass in a sense where it's, you don't know really we're in this day and age where it's like, you don't know if you say too much or too less,
right?
Because everything hits media, everything gets spiraled out of control. And it's just, I really think that they're just trying to figure out a way of like how much can really one handle depending on what their position is. And right now, I do think that DAmaro needs to really step up his game, whether that's the intentions or not to get Chapek out, because even with Chapek as Parks, even though he may not have known 100%, yes, I joked about him speaking through a teleprompter and what have you, but I would love to see Josh be more involved, not just taking pictures in the park, but, making these statements of saying, what he plans on doing with the parks, because he's the chairman of parks. When they were announcing things with the parks, it was Stags that made the announcement. It was Chapek making the announcement. It was Michael Eisner, letting Frank Wells give, announcement. It's like, why does it always have to be Chapek that has to have the final announcement? You're chairman of the parks. What are you going to do to better the parks? How are you going to foresee the future of saying, okay, we can fix this or we can do this? I'm not getting that vibe from Josh right now. And I hope, in some time, because I think this is why William even came up with this question in the first place, because Josh really isn't putting himself in that spotlight, so to speak. So it does beg the question, is there manipulation? But I don't think it's to that extent.
Yeah, I agree with you, George. I don't think there's any kind of 4D chess going on here, because look, if Bob Iger is really unhappy with Bob Chapek, and I've held firm to this opinion. I really do believe it. Like, I feel like if Bob Iger really was unhappy with Bob Chapek and he really wanted Josh DeMaro, well, Bob Iger is the executive chairman. I mean, he walks on water in regards to the board of directors at Disney. Mm-hmm. They can call a vote Chapek out, and install DeMaro. Mm-hmm. I mean, all this 4D chess doesn't even need to happen. He has the power to vote him out, you know? So that it doesn't make any sense. But what do you think, Dre?
And sorry, Dre, before you go, one last thing I just have to say really quick is not as a manipulation, but as just a strategy tactic. I think Iger placed Chapek during the time when the company was going to be in its most vulnerable, because of just when everything was shutting down and everything was closing. Lo and behold, Iger stepping down and Chapek's moving up, because of what we were talking about with Chapek being the consumer product and knowing Wall Street and knowing how to bring forth revenue. I really think, in a sense of, the economic times of what the country went through and is still going through, and it will even continue in the future, I think you really need a numbers guy to kind of hold their heads above water while going through this process. So I think in that manner, that's where Chapek a little bit is above DeMaro as far as for a CEO, until everything kind of comes back together for the company.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts, Vash?
Well, I agree with you in the sense that, look, Chapek was the numbers guy, and I think Bob Iger had faith in him, and I think the time period speaks to your point, George, than that this is the guy that can kind of get us through there. I disagree with you guys a little bit on a couple of things. One is, now I know you say Bob Iger is there and can vote him out, but think about what that would do to the stock price and the investors' confidence in Disney. That would create a lot of uncertainty and instability. So it is one of those things where you would have to tread carefully in doing something like that, because I'm pretty sure a lot of investors would go, what? Like, do they know what they're doing over there, kind of thing? So I think it is a little bit. But look, I disagree in saying that. What is it? What do I disagree about? I gotta about the conversations, because there was a couple of things that happened there. Okay, well, I'll disagree here in that DAmaro, he's not just waiting in the wings. He's not doing anything. I got to disagree with William here. He says, and I quote, what is it? He's quiet and sitting back because he's been told to do so by Iger. They are letting Chapek spiral down, and he's not making these decisions, referring to Josh DAmaro. He's watching the train wreck, right? I'll give you a quote right here. This is from the interview that just followed the announcement of Genie and Genie Plus, okay? This is what Josh DAmaro says in his own words. Okay. Genie is a tool that I'm very bullish about and know will materially improve the guest experience. Okay, so as opposed to what you've been saying, George, and how it's been the chairman of the parks, kind of been out front releasing these products. Josh DAmaro is doing the same thing. He's saying right here, I've been very bullish about this. This is a decision that I believe in. He's doing it. He is making these decisions. It's not Chapek from Uptown giving him what to do and then he goes off. Obviously, Chapek has given the directive, hey, look, monetize the parks any way you can. Yes. It's how that monetization takes place that is in Josh DAmaro's control. And he is making these decisions. He is that person who is like, hey, look, we're going to keep the reservation systems around. Or we're going to do any number of things that fans don't enjoy. He's making those decisions, not Chapek. Okay, so I understand that people like Josh DAmaro, that people have, they like how he's in the parks, how he's been very vocal about cast members in the past, how he's kind of feels like he's one of them, and so to speak, and how he's so relatable, and all these things that people like about Josh DAmaro. I understand, I get it, but don't let that, you can't just keep the rose-colored glasses on with this guy, and let that shield you from the fact that, or block your vision out, and not allow you to see what's going on here. Josh DAmaro is making these decisions. Josh DeAmaro is the guy that's running the parks right now. And while he hasn't been the face of it in kind of like, like a D23 kind of sense where he's kind of leading the parks panel, he really hasn't gotten that opportunity to do that quite yet. And I think that will happen with Destination D and some of the other events coming up. But understand, folks, he's the guy.
Yeah.
And if you have a problem with how these things are being run, he's there.
So do you think that with his decision, and that's what's making the burn come on to Chapek? Because everyone kind of has like that sensibility of saying, you know what, we love Josh, but we're not too keen about Bob. So who are we going to put the blame on?
Yeah.
So even if it is coming from Josh, everything is now focused on Chapek.
Yeah. I think a lot of.
So do you think that was? Do you think that's purposely done, or do you think that's just the fan community just being the beast that they are?
I think it's a combination of the fan community and the trades kind of playing into that.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of directing it towards Chapek's the bad guy. That's the guy that you should go out with, and fans kind of fomenting that themselves, but also playing into that. It's kind of this this cycle that reinforces itself. Right. But look, Josh DeAmaro, I think he's ambitious, and part of that ambition is getting to where you want to be, and part of getting to where you want to be is making the boss happy,
right, and
getting in his good graces, right? I think that's what he's doing. He is playing into the tone being set by Chapek, but he's making these decisions to get on his good side. I think that's what's going on. I think he's a little bit of a kiss ass, but that's just me.
That I definitely agree. He is a kiss ass. And I think that's more so why, not necessarily sitting back doing nothing, but more of like that behind the scenes sort of thing where he is doing it, but it's not in the forefront. Right. Like where it's
not coming down on him. It's not being
noticeable that it's him making the decision opposite of Chapek.
Yeah, and people also have to understand something, that when we complain about things going on in the company right now, especially with theme parks, right? Genie Plus, reservations, and things like that.
Who's the first person that comes out of their mouth?
Well, it's Chapek.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. These programs didn't just magically appear in the last month. Yep. These have been programs that have been in the works for years and even beta tested long before Chapek took over as CEO. The Genie thing was announced 2 years ago, which means the public announcement was 2 years ago. There were probably board meetings and talks and for a year or two before that even, when Chapek was not the CEO. Then you have reservations, which people, again, blame on Chapek, which were beta tested with the Galaxy's Edge Open. They were beta testing it. This was the
Flex Pass and everything,
Flex Pass, all that was all tested under Bob Iger. This is the thing with the corporate politics when it comes to this. People don't like Chapek, but I'm telling you, a lot of stuff happening right now is stuff that Iger is a lot more cool with than fans want to believe.
Yeah, and Disney even admitted that. Like when you listen to any of the Imagineers, then they say there's things that we work on 5, 6, 10 years into the future before it even gets announced. And they didn't even have even too much to even say on the Genie app when they announced it at the expo. So, which means they were still in the process of still creating the format, probably. But as you said, but that even the main concept could have came like 4 years prior.
Well, you look at Genie and Genie Plus and stuff like that, and we're like, oh, the branding is kind of weird. I think they took that product and just said, we're going to integrate a whole bunch of stuff into it. We're going to make it into this kind of new vision for Fast Pass and so forth. We're going to, and Josh DeAmaro even says it. He's like, hey, we were given an opportunity to consolidate our product line into one product that is Genie Plus, Lightning Lane, all this kind of stuff, and synchronize it between both parks. Yeah. I think that's what happened there.
Yeah, because walking out of the panel, I heard people talk about like, oh, this stupid Genie app. What are we going to do with that? That's not going to work. But Disney already knew what they had planned for that app.
Yeah. And to the overall thing of like, Iger kind of grooming DAmaro to be the CEO and this like kind of coup to replace Chapek.
That's where I think it's over exaggerated.
Yeah, I just don't see that happening. I kind of, for a little while there, I kind of thought something was going on with the ScarJo thing. That kind of thing has sort of tapered off. The stock price is like sitting at like 180 right now. It would take a lot, I think, to get him out of there at this point. I mean, unless something dramatically happens.
Well, I still think if something happens with Marvel, like
I agree with you.
That's gonna
be the
with Kevin Feige, absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, I do think Chapek was put into the role, and it was kind of trial by fire kind of thing, where hey, if this goes belly up, we just point to that guy, kind of thing, and I do think it was kind of a way to shield Iger from what was eventually coming. But look, Chapek, he performed extremely well. He did what he did with consumer products, did what he did with the parks, and applied it to the entire company. And the company made its way through. And he has earned his keep with investors and some of the power players when it comes to Disney, right? So I think in that respect, I think like he's pretty safe. And what could derail him? His relationship with talent, his relationship with Marvel specifically. Kevin Feige, if he walks out the door, that's it. It's over. Done. That goose is cooked. But as long as those profit generators, as long as those golden gooses keep laying eggs, I think he's going to be there.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about outsiders, right, in this segment. How, Chapek is seen as an outsider with the Hollywood studios. Well, DAmaro is arguably even worse in that arena. I mean, at least Chapek had that video distribution experience under Michael Eisner. Chapek was the guy who came up with the Vault and all that stuff. At least he's got some experience. I don't know of anything that DAmaro has under his belt that relates to studio. You would basically be thrown into the same situation as you were with Chapek, with a guy who's got all park experience and nothing to do with the studio. Now, to DAmaro's advantage, he's more of a smoother. Absolutely. He's going to be on the red carpet every single time a new movie comes out. He's more charismatic. He's going to smooth, wine, and dine a lot more than Chapek does, I think.
Yeah.
But outside of that, he's an outsider too. He's not a studio guy.
And I've said it a time or two, and I know you guys are probably tired of hearing me say it, but I think it was after the fact that the board of directors did not grant Staggs as the new upcoming CEO after the fact that Iger was to retire. That's when you started to see contingencies throughout the company of saying, okay, what are we going to do? Because Iger kept on putting off his retirement. It's like, okay, yep, I'm gonna leave the company this year. Oh nope, I'm on for another 2 years. It was almost like a sort of like a wait game sort of thing where it was, okay, we're stalling time to really try to fill those shoes. And then it wasn't until boom, the pandemic hit, shut down everywhere, and it's like, okay, we really have to act fast. Who is going to be able to get us out of this financially? Oh, well, how about the consumer products guy? Okay, well, if he's moving to CEO, who's going to take over parks? Well, DAmaro's been kind of floating around there a little bit, so let's kind of put him in park. So I think it's basically just trying to fit the puzzle pieces temporarily in there until they can find a bigger, better plan. But I think they pretty much just had to utilize what they had after the fact that they denied Staggs CEO.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I actually kind of wish Bob Iger would have had a little more of an open mind. I think that Bob Iger and the board were really focused on really promoting from within. I feel like obviously legally they have to say they're looking into every option, but I don't think they really took a lot of outside options that seriously. I think it was really kind of like they really wanted to promote someone from within. And like George was saying that like after Staggs, it was really Chapek was last man standing. The problem with this, though, is that just because someone is from inside Disney doesn't mean they're a better fit for Disney. I can point to a million things. Ron Miller was a literal Disney. He was a literal Disney. He was married to Walt Disney's daughter, Diane. And his tenure as CEO was not great. And I love Ron. I do, no disrespect. But from a business perspective, he didn't do a great job leading the Walt Disney Company.
Yeah,
then Michael Eisner comes in from Paramount. And he takes it to new heights. This guy wasn't at Disney. Michael Eisner from freaking Paramount, right?
Yeah.
you just don't know. And that's why I wish Bob Iger would have said, hey, we just acquired Fox. Let's look at the roster of people we have that we're acquiring and maybe consider them. And I don't think they really did. I really don't.
They really should consider going a little bit outside of the Disney bubble, so to speak, when it comes to that.
Right? I think, you know why? I think Bob Iger, this is where his kind of legacy and his kind of like obsession with it comes in, right? I think he wanted to groom somebody from the inside that he had personal connections with, that he had personal relationship with, and he could say, hey, I left you with a great company, here's my boy, and that makes me look better on the back end of it. And I don't think that quite worked out the way he wanted, but I think that's why. I don't think he wanted to be a guy who simply selected from the roster. I think he wanted to be the reason that guy was successful, right? I think that's kind of where that mindset and philosophy was going.
Yeah.
In terms of Ron Miller, I think some things were put on his shoulders that maybe were unfair. But largely I agree with you, OG, that he's just unfit. He was just not fit for that role. I mean, he was just that wasn't the guy, clearly. But, Roy Disney having the kind of the foresight to go with somebody like a Michael Eisner and a Frank Wells and bring them in, this guy from Paramount, this guy from Warner Brothers, smack them together, let's go. It was a brilliant, awesome move, and sometimes you had to have that kind of like, hey, let's take a step back, let's have that foresight, let's have that kind of ambition, that kind of, let's take a risk kind of mentality and mindset. And as we know, Iger, not necessarily a risky guy.
Well, yeah, and that's what really surprised me with this successor decision from Bob was like, I was expecting someone like crazy, because like I don't know. I was expecting Bob, because Iger has really thrown a lot of curveballs over the years. It shocked me when I woke up and found out they were buying Star Wars, Lucasfilm. Yeah. It shocked me when I found out they were buying Marvel, and like, he always had these curveballs, and then when it came to his successor, it was like the safest thing he could have done. Yeah. Like I thought, you know what? Oh, he's gonna merge with Apple, and there's gonna be like Tim Cook, and then it's gonna be like this whole big drama, like craziness going on when and it wasn't any of that. It was like, let's pick the safest guy we can find in the company. And they went with it. Now, granted, the pandemic was looming, so maybe he had to dial back his ambitions a little bit or something. But the successor thing really did surprise me on how not ambitious it was. And I'm not anti-Chapek. I give him a fair shake here on the channel. But an ambitious pick he was not.
No. But, I mean, look, the company did profit from that pick.
He did.
I mean, as far as the books go, I mean, even the Wall Street Journal article even says it, right? It even says, like, hey, a lot of entertainment companies, they didn't do so hot, but Disney was one that did better than most.